All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session on DevOps with Akamai APIs. My name is Usha Gottipati, and I work with Cognizant Technology Solutions. I've been with Cognizant for about 11 years, and I've been working on the cloud infrastructure and Akamai integrations for almost about 2 years now. We mainly will talk about the process before Akamai APIs were introduced and how we used to handle the Akamai configuration changes, and then the pain points we had before the APIs and what made us to come up with the CICD procedure or to automate the deployment process, and then the solution, how we designed the solution and all the orchestration, and we'll show you a short demo on it, and obviously share some benefits we've achieved with this process. And we'll take the questions at the end of the session.
Hi, this is Saurabh Deshpande. I've been working with Cognizant Technology Solutions in banking and financial services unit. I've been working with them for almost 12 years, experience on app development, platform development, now on cloud and automation. So we'll go to the next slide. So prior to using APIs, I think most of us would have been using Property Manager or Configuration Manager, through Luna portal, making changes in each of our configuration files. Typically, you would have 3 environments at least for your dev, QA, and prod, right? So you would have 3 configuration files on Akamai as well, which you would have to probably manually edit each time. So you would do your changes in dev environment. Then after everything was tested, you would do those changes again in the QA configuration, right? And then you would go ahead and do those changes in the prod environment. So basically you are repeating the whole process, repetition of work, and it was a manual and error prone process, just because over a period of time, those 3 configurations, which are supposed to be same or similar, end up looking totally different. It could be due to different reasons. It could be either who is making the changes, the order of the priority of rules in Property Manager, or whether Akamai APIs is coming in and doing some changes with advanced XML metadata, etc. Right? So although the 3 configurations are supposed to be the same, they end up looking different, and then you have a challenge of, although I did this change in dev and in QA, why doesn't it work in prod? So this were our pain point, and the last but not the least was testing in staging environment. Any changes that you would do typically to Akamai configurations, you have Akamai staging network and Akamai prod network. So you would have to you could spoof your host file to point to a staging IP of Akamai and do your testing. The problem was, if you have a VPN or you are sitting behind a proxy, that doesn't work. So you would have to go home, go out of office, use your personal hotspot to do this testing and make sure that spoofing is working and you can test in staging. So basically the pain points were manual effort, duplication of work, and there could be defects. And because you had to do this 3 times in the 3 configuration files, obviously it was slow time to market, and the testing was just too tedious. So this is where last time we got introduced to Akamai PAPI API, and at the last Edge conference in San Francisco. And with that Property Manager API, there was also Property Manager variable support announced. And as soon as that was, we were attending that session, and we realized putting them together, there could be huge benefits, and we could completely automate the process of how the deployments of configuration files on Akamai happen. So our CICD objectives were to reduce manual effort, scope of error. We wanted to be faster and more agile. We are in agile world now. Lots of changes coming through from different app teams, and we wanted to make sure that we could do them and make sure that we could push the dev to QA and QA to prod. Basically, that's how any app development, any app promotion happens. You don't go and code in dev, you don't go and code in QA, you don't go and code in prod for your app development. Why should you do that for Akamai configuration changes? So basically, we wanted the ease in propagating changes from dev to prod all the way, and automate the testing process also, eliminating the manual effort and leveraging a template, a reusable configuration file that works in all the 3 environments. So before PAPI, we also, the demo, we are going to have a demo today, which is going to show how we are using Property Manager API and Cloudlet API as well. But we have been using GTM API, we have Fast Purge API, and we are also using CPS Beta API. So we have completely changed how we work now, and we do not do any manual changes, do not go into the portal or do any changes. The whole thing is hooked up together in a pipeline, so we just do the changes in dev and propagate those changes into Akamai staging and prod network into higher configuration files. Yeah, so when the property manager variable support was announced, right, we were able to make the config the JSON configuration, which is through API. We were able to make it as a template itself, where the property manager variables would be reused, and they would decide whether it's a dev environment, it's a QA environment, or a prod environment, and accordingly, the same rules would get pushed onto the three Akamai configuration files. So we started using configuration file Akamai configurations as code. We put them in Git repository, and we given access to certain cloudlets like forward rewrite or edge redirector cloudlet, which are pretty simple 301, 302 type of redirection changes you do or a rewrite. And we have given access to certain developer teams as well to enable them to do their own changes. Obviously, we review the changes and we go ahead and deploy those changes. So that's what we did with Git repo, stored all the configurations on Akamai into the repo, and started doing changes in the Git repo and not on Akamai Luna portal, basically. The next step was continuous delivery. We leveraged Jenkins, and again, because that was our CICD stack, we did not have to go and purchase any additional licenses. We were already having it on our corporate, so we just started using it, and we started doing deployments or activations or publications of Akamai configuration file through Jenkins on staging and Akamai production network. And the third one was obviously continuous testing. We wanted to make sure that as soon as the deployments were completed in staging and prod, we could test them. And testing was just not about spoofing in staging, but comparing what changes you are doing versus what are there in the prod network. So basically, whatever changes we do on Akamai network, they are primarily, you could debug them or test them using Akamai Pragma headers. So that's what we started doing using continuous testing. We have Cognizant's proprietary platform tool called as FastTest. That's what we use. So it's similar to Sauce Labs, you could say, wherein you have different OS, browser, and devices you could leverage to do testing. Whether it's a mobile detection redirection testing, whether it's a forward read-write, you could compare those headers now. You could capture those headers through FastTest instead of having to go out of your network and do those changes. So this is the solution stack that we leverage. Again, we reuse what we had in our organization. The PAPI API, we had to write orchestration layer on top of it. We have been requesting Akamai to make CLI more comprehensive, but I think we were just too fast, too quick for them, and we were able to churn this out in integrating with PAPI API and wrote an orchestration layer on top of it. That again is stored in the Git repo. You could be using SVN, whatever you have. Basically, we did our development in NetBeans and mostly in Java because that's what we were most comfortable with. Maven was used for build, and Jenkins was creating those. Whenever we would do code updates, Jenkins would pick up the latest code and build the jar basically, and the jar would be stored in a repo. We were using JFrog, but anything like Nexus or Continuum could be leveraged for here. Even instead of Jenkins, you could use Cruise Control for Microsoft .NET, or Continuum again for Java as well. So that was our CI stack. The CD stack was again Jenkins, and here we would, in the demo, we'll show you how we were doing the publications going forward, wherein we just we could either integrate PAPI or Cloudlet and click a few buttons. We would be activating configurations in staging or Akamai production network. We hooked up Fastest on top of it, where again Fastest would do the testing, gone through Fastest, and we were using Jira. We were in agile model. We used to work on priorities, and the app teams typically decide the priorities. So we were doing the configuration changes in Luna while side by side developing this solution. So we leveraged Selenium automation framework, which again worked with our Fastest tool. And all our test script, test automation would also be stored in Jira. That's what we were using for our stories and requirement. So this is the solution. I would hand it over to Usha now to demo on how we have done it. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh. So I'll walk you through our CI/CD template, and I'll show you our configurations also. For the demo purpose, we've actually created a NetSuite configuration on Akamai portal. And this is the production version of the configuration, but we have a dev and QA alternatives of the same configuration. As Saurabh was mentioning, we'll use the JSON configuration file from our Git repository and deploy it onto the 3 Akamai configurations for dev, QA, and prod. We've basically used the PAPI variables to come up with this template. And obviously, the property host names will be different for dev, QA, and prod, but the property rules are the same for all 3. So if we go through the configuration, the variables we use are environment variable and an origin hostname variable. So the environment variable basically holds the incoming host header. It basically captures the request header, the domain that you're making the request on, and assigns to this variable. And the origin hostname is the origin server's hostname itself. And it is defaulted to production origin hostname. And we use the, and we use the environment variable to check the incoming host header and change the origin hostname for dev and QA respectively. And a typical Akamai configuration has an origin server behavior in the default rule as part of the default rule, right? So we've extracted it from the default rule and put it as a child rule. Let me minimize all of this. So yeah. So we've extracted the origin behavior from the default rule and put it as a child rule here. And the default rule has all the default behaviors that the origin, basically all 3 environments have in common. For this instance, we've given a CP code. This is the prod CP code, and we have a few other rules, along with the forward redirect cloudlet for the production environment. And this is where we set the variable, the environment variable, with the incoming host header. So the child rules basically check this incoming host header, and if it is a dev host name, we assign the dev origin and then the dev CP code. And if the dev has any specific behaviors to be added, like forward redirect cloudlet in this instance, we add it. And if there's any other behavior, you could add it in this child rule. And similarly, we have another child rule for QA environment. We check the incoming host header for QA and then add the behaviors for QA. And finally, the origin rule has the origin behavior, and this has the origin host name assigned as the origin host name variable itself, which we've assigned in the previous rules. So this is our template, and we've basically using the variables and this template, we were able to achieve the CI/CD deployment. I mean, using the same configuration from our Git repo and deploy it into all 3 environments. So let me go back and show you how our Git repo looks like. This is our Git repo, and we have 2 different folders. One is code repo and one is config repo. Code is obviously the Java code. We've written the orchestration layer using Java. So all the API code and the post-processing and everything is handled in the code repo. And our Jenkins job generates a jar file, and that is what we use to invoke the API. And the config repo is where all the JSON configurations are stored. So we have Cloudlet and Property Manager for now, but we're working on developing or integrating it with CPS API also. But that's work in progress. So if you go inside the Property Manager, we have different JSON files for different Akamai configurations. So the Akamai configuration I just showed you on the Luna portal, for each config there are 3 different JSON files that we store in the repo. One has the host names, one is the rules file itself, and the other one is the property group and version details. So if I open it, this is the JSON file with the property ID, group ID, and the version details. And this is the file with host names details. So dev, prod, and QA will have 3 different host name JSON files stored in the Git repo. And they'll have their own version and property ID details, but the rules file is common for all 3 dev, QA, and prod environments. So as part of this demo, what I'll do is I'll do a very small change, like change a TTL. Currently in prod, it's basically 2 hours. I already edited the file. I have it as 4 hours. And I'll execute the commands, and then I'll show you. I'll activate the configuration in staging, and I'll show you how the staging and production headers are captured through the test scripts that we've written. And yep, we'll see the short demo. Before I execute this command, we actually use Jenkins, but there are some connectivity issues, so I'm not able to run or execute the build from Jenkins. So let me go and show what we do in Jenkins. We actually, invoke it in command line like this. I'm going to execute the same command line from my command prompt in my local system. And so yeah, this is the jar file that we generate from our Java code. And these are the inputs that this expects. So the first one is the API type. This is either PAPI or Cloudlet, or in future it could be CPS also. And this is the text file. I'll open the text file and show it to you in a moment. So this text file basically has all the commands that you want to perform or execute, and this is to mention if it's a mobile detection redirect or a regular kind of change. For now, I'm not doing an MDR change, so it's false. Let me open the text file and show you how it looks like. Basically, we went with the text file because it was the simplest option we found. So we defined multiple parameters in the text file, type, group ID, action, version, property, input, and a lot of other parameters. Type and action are the main parameters which define the type of action that the API does. So this text file takes all the inputs that, or supports all the inputs that the API, the Akamai API exposes. So we can give multiple commands in this file, and all of them will be executed in a sequential manner. So the first command is property versions and action is create. This would typically create a new version of this property with group ID and property ID that we give here. And then the second one will update the rules of the version we just created. And the third command will activate the version that we just created and updated. So let me go over to the command line and execute these commands. Oops. So if you see, all 3 will be executed in a sequential manner. It takes a little bit of time to go through. Okay. So we just saw there was a new version created, and it basically updated all the rules and gave me the output. And the third action is to activate the property itself. If you see, we got a property activation response, and the status is pending. What the code does is it captures the activation ID and keeps polling the API for every 2 minutes, or we can basically customize it and check the status of it. So once the activation is successful, then it will go ahead and trigger the test scripts, the Selenium test scripts, which run on the fastest platform. And those test scripts will capture the staging and production Akamai Pragma headers. Those are the Pragma headers will show the actual Akamai configuration change that we just did. Like the TTL, we just changed it from 2 hours to 4 hours, and that's what we'll see. Since this is going to take about 2 minutes to get activated, let me open a Cloudlet configuration also and show you how it looks like. For this demo, we've actually used forward rewrite Cloudlet. And this is what a very simple, very basic forward rewrite Cloudlet looks like. It only has 2 rules, and even for Cloudlets, we just use a single configuration file from the Git repo and deploy it onto the Akamai network, all dev, QA, and prod networks. So there's a path match rule and there's a regex rule. If you observe the regex rule, we've written the regex in such a way that it applies for all 3 environments. So if you deploy the same file in dev, QA, and prod, it will basically work for all 3 of them because of the regex. And path is anyways a simple, straightforward path match, so it will anyways work in all 3 environments. And Cloudlet also has a similar deployment text file like I've shown for PAPI, and it also has a list of commands that it expects. Like if the type is policy versions and action is create, it will basically create a new policy version. And we can give again multiple commands here like policy versions, create, and then update, and then activate. Oops. So we can execute all these commands in a similar manner. Oops, yeah. And it would do the same thing. It would create a new policy version, update it, and activate it. But since Cloudlet takes about 30 minutes to activate, I'm not going to activate it. I'm just going to show you the PAPI execution. So the activation is complete. The scripts have just started or are triggered. It's going to take about a minute or so to capture these headers. Okay, yeah, there they are. So these are the staging headers. And if you see, oops, I think I might have not updated the staging, but okay, sorry, something happened. Oh, this. Basically, the activation JSON has version 12, so let me go. No, I think I activated the correct one, but the headers, something happened, so sorry. But what happens is, I know it, I was very afraid that this could happen in the demo. I practiced it many times before, but the headers were captured properly. I don't know what happened. So what happens is, you can see all the Akamai headers, or all the HTTP response headers are captured by the test script. But if it is staging, you would have seen an Akamai staging header, and that's what makes sure that this is, or the headers captured are for staging network. And we would have seen a 4-hour TTL, and for production network, we would have seen a 2-hour TTL, and that's where we would have made sure that the TTL change was deployed successfully and validated properly. So once the headers are captured and we validate the changes through these headers, we go ahead and activate the configuration in production network. So this lifecycle happens in all three environments. So we first do this in dev. Once the testing is complete, once production is properly deployed and everything is good, we do the same thing in QA, and then we do the same thing in prod. But I just did it directly in prod just for the demo purpose. So yeah, that was the demo. And if we go back to the PPT, I just wanted to show the benefit after we've implemented this process. Our main intention was to reduce the amount of work we do, along with automating the testing, and basically reduction in effort was our main goal, and we've achieved it. If you see, there's a 40% reduction in making the changes on the configurations and deploying them, and there's about a 90% reduction in the effort we've noticed after implementing or automating the testing in staging environment. And one main thing the main thing that gave us confidence is deploying the changes from dev to QA to prod, the same configuration file. We deploy it as code from one environment to the other environment, and that was the main confidence booster for us during deployments. So yeah, that was our journey and story in implementing the CI/CD for Akamai changes. Yeah, we'll take questions.
My question relates to the state that you're in now, which is great. Do you find that you have some other obstacles to face from the business and to ask your development team to have, say, 2 or 3 or 4 multiple projects in the pipeline at one time? And so is that something that you face too, or are you still only deploy to staging one project at a time?
Yeah, we never had the problem of deploying or running multiple projects at a time. We actually did it in agile process, and we used to prioritize the stories, so we never took multiple projects at one time. So we used to do a project, deploy it, complete it, and then take up the other projects. So
the idea was, in addition to that, is we would use Git repo, to branch and then pull them if there were any multiple requests. We were just fortunate that we did not get too many parallel requests that would cause conflicts going to production.
Right. I'm actually headed down the same path as you. We're in a circumstance where maybe an Akamai configuration cannot be deployed for project A, but needs to be for project B.
Correct.
And
Correct.
multiple testers might be wanting to get it to the environment
Yep.
at the same time. So
right.
I think the solution is using Git repo. That's where you would, sort out all those problems. You would have a current, like a parent, and you could branch it out and then deploy those changes in dev or QA accordingly. I think it's not that would be a problem even in a normal app development. Too many teams working on the same app code trying to deploy. So the solution would be with Git repo.
And if the configurations are different, you could probably branch out and give the developers access and make them commit changes to the branch, and then you can review them and deploy them.
So basically we were doing very frequent changes. Although we were not getting conflicts, we were doing sometimes weekly once minimum, sometimes daily changes once or twice a day. So this simplified our complete change management, release management process. We were now confident of propagating those changes because they were already tested in lower environments. We did not have to redo those changes again. You have a question? I will complete. Yeah.
I'm a bit confused. You said that you have only one configuration that is serving multiple environments.
That's correct.
So if that is the case, then when you are just done with your dev test, you still want your code to be pushed out to production before the Akamai configuration is live in production. I didn't get that part where you said that you take it from dev and then you push it out to QA and then you push it out to prod.
Right.
That makes it sound like that you have got multiple Akamai configurations.
There are multiple Akamai configurations.
Correct.
Yes.
One
so it's
configuration in the Git repository. The JSON file is a single file, but we wanted to differentiate configurations on Akamai because whenever there's a change we do in dev, we didn't want to affect the production environment. So we wanted to have different configs on Akamai, but the configuration in our repository is just one.
So in Akamai, you still have 3 properties?
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason is because we would isolate changes that are in prod. When we are doing a change in dev, we did not want to touch the same config file.
Yep. Yep.
On Akamai, just one on our one in repo.
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean, yeah, we didn't create a template on Akamai. We just had a JSON template in our repository, and then we'll use it for the properties, a new property coming in or an existing property. But we'll use that to deploy it on 3 different properties on Akamai network.
The base template, I mean, how did you create the base template? You must have created the base template on Akamai to extract the JSON out of it so that you can push it in your source code tool, right, and then blow up that property and then create multiple properties. Is that the outcome?
So when we started, we had to do like that. We had to create a template, you know. So we came up with that. We knew how it should look in Property Manager. As soon as variable support was announced, and we were still new to variable support, the XML schema, not the XML schema in this case, the JSON schema in this case can be tricky. You need to be very well versed, and that's where you need developers doing this and not business users doing these changes. Net, we had to extract it first time, but once we did it, then we used that template, and then we would create configs for dev going reusing that template. Get me? So that was like our base template, we would call it.
And I have one question with regards to CPS, because you guys talked about CPS too. So right now, how do you do your certificate management? Because I don't think you're using the CPS API. So I'm assuming you guys still manual.
Yeah, we have.
I mean, it's not
party.
for the demo. We did not show it for the demo. It's we have integrated it. It's in, like, we have done it in QA environment for us. So we use the CPS. You know how you would do if you are managing Akamai certs on Akamai, right? Instead of manually generating the CSR, and if you wanted to generate the cert from your own certifying authority rather than using Akamai certifying authority, then you would have to open a ticket with your own internal system, and you do that. So luckily we had an API from our own certificate
CA.
Provisioning system, CA. So we hooked that with CPS, wherein we say create a new SAN or add a new SAN, download the CSR, push it to the CA via API. We get it back in 2 minutes. We upload it. Deployment takes 4 hours, but
Yeah.
but that whole process would have been taken weeks or at least a week, right? I mean, you're raising requests, then waiting for a few days. Somebody has to approve this. So that entire thing has been eliminated, and it's completely automated. It's in QA. It's not done in prod. And so, and I think CPS is in beta as well. So that's why we are not in prod yet. Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, staging deployment for the certificate for the CPS takes 4 hours. If
In
I'm
staging and in prod.
and in prod. So it's literally, and we do it in staging and prod because again we do the testing in staging. Make sure there are no fossil cert errors that happen in staging, and the cert is good to go to prod. We are asking Akamai for a long time. 2 hours is better than 8 hours, right? It could be done in few hours. So the other thing was Cloudlet. It takes 30 minutes. We have been asking if that could be done as well, but I think audience segmentation and visitor prioritization takes few minutes. We just happen to use more of forward rewrites and edge redirectors.
What other outlets do you guys use?
We use forward rewrite, edge redirector mainly.
Yeah, and we also are in, again, it's in dev or QA, you can say ALB, advanced load balancing.
Yeah.
Cloudlets is API, so any Cloudlet has an API. So it's just
it's just
which
different
Cloudlet you want to
endpoints
use.
and
Any questions here?
Yeah.
My question is, one first great presentation, right? When you're taking this approach of having your source control, having your JSON template, if you get a new feature, you want to add a new behavior, which approach are you going to take? Are you updating the property manager UI and then downloading the JSON and then updating your source control? Or are you updating JSON and then going the other way? Just want to know.
So, because the documentation on developer may be lagging behind what's on property manager, and if you want to use those features, we do that. we have a config which is not this configs. We don't touch them. We don't touch the configs which are CI/CD in Luna at all. Okay, we have a dummy config sitting there where we go and like plug and pull it. Everything that is our test config. It does not even point anywhere. Basically, it's just to try this, get the schema into JSON, and then we study that JSON, and then it's easier to plug in into any of the configuration files. Yeah, that is also in Git. So we just pull it down and we study it basically, because I think Property Manager is adding more features, faster features than the API documentation is getting updated. So we just study the schema through doing that process through that process.
Not really. That's just for the demo.
So I'm just asking you that you maybe think of spanning out multiple ways or multiple ways. What are the maybe good things or something you have learned that you can share?
So I think in this demo we showed forward rewrite, but we have a lot of those changes. Actually, we do, as I said, we do a lot of changes on forward rewrite, and typical scenarios are you would go to different origins. And again, that is abstracted out of having to hard code to a specific environment. So let's take an example of www.akamai.com/cloudlets, which is a SEO friendly, search friendly URL, and you want it to go to cloudlets.akamai.com. So instead of adding more host names on Akamai property, we actually we use forward rewrite for them. And unless it's a totally different domain that you want cloudlets.akamai.com as well Akamai's, right? Then we create different configuration. Just like you would not want app A code to be touched, code changes affect code B, app B changes, it's the same thing. We just segregated them into different files, and that's why even we did split out the dev, QA and prod as well. There is a way, Akamai has shown us that you could have all the 3 edge host names into one config file, and you just change that file, and you would have to, but that is for us still touching production code, right? So we did not like that model. We prefer to do it, keep them separate.
But the only thing you have to make sure is the forward rewrite path shouldn't, create any conflicts. That's what we basically check and then implement.
We are looking at making it reusable. I do not know if we discussed of making it open source, but yeah, we definitely have plans to make it reusable and make it available to all other clients as well. Yep.
This seems to be like a feature that Akamai should be offering to all.
Yeah, and we have discussed that as well. They are in CLI, something that they are working on. It just
it's our
yeah, we would be glad to work together. Yeah. What is that? Yeah, we have not done that. It's just that, again, you're talking about CLI, right? CLI is working in a different way. That is through command line. It's the same way in a way, but we are using Jenkins, and that's where we prefer a different approach to give a sequence of commands rather than typing each command through CLI one by one. And yeah, I think it just, CLI, we tried CLI as well. We got this done in a few weeks, in a matter of a couple of months, I think. And I think CLI is still in beta or limited beta. And we could definitely work, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So we developed this for a BFS client, and now we have to think about making it reusable or open source maybe, and we would need to go through the whole process to make sure we do not create any issues. I think I had a question.
Yeah.
So whenever you do a code push, do you also push the Akamai configuration to keep it sync, or you're always deploying a change?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Are you always pushing the Akamai configuration out the way you demonstrated in the slide deck, or do you only have a code change? Do you just push code change?
No.
So code change, basically the code is the Java orchestration layer that we built on top of the API.
Or if you're, I think he's talking about the application code itself. Yeah, we don't, we are not the application team, so we don't touch the application code. So it's just the Akamai configuration updates.
Yeah, that's true. That was one of our feedback as well. You could not just create a version and update it. Every time you had to update it, started creating its own version. You could not update the version that was not even activated in staging. So yeah, this is just, I mean, we leveraged the API. We just built a better version right now, or it is currently a better version right now. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.